what do you think the number one reason is in general why businesses fail? What do you think the number one is?
So I think the number one reason businesses fail is the owner, CEO, founder's inability to professionalize the organization.
Okay. So what does that mean?
And I think if we sort of dumb that down into layman's terms, the guy or gal that started this business has not figured out how to iterate their own persona, their ability to manage other people, their communication style, and their skills that are relevant to this business enough to sustain it against enormous currents that businesses feel. And those currents are economic, those currents are financial, and those currents come from their competition and external sources like landlords.
Okay.
So it's essentially the business owner's failure to learn, study, and guide the folks around them.
So in listening to what you just said, right? James always says like, listen for understanding, but now James is saying you got to listen for learning. So if I'm listening for learning from what you're talking about, my takeaway, why businesses fail, it's the communication aspect.
I think it's the most important thing, number one.
So talk to me a little bit about, if I was to ask you how an experienced and seasoned business professional, like how they've scaled their business centered around the topic of communication, what are some do's and don'ts that distinguish a great communicator / business owner versus a bad one?
So if we're distinguishing good business owners from bad business owners, which is sort of simplistic terms, but the ones that are going to succeed or have a high probability to succeed versus the ones that don't, it's their ability to, number one, communicate a vision to everyone around them. Because that includes not just employees. We're talking about customers, we're talking about their family, and we're talking about outside folks, including investors or other folks that they're hoping, maybe even franchisees, they're hoping to bring into the business down the road. And so communication isn't a one-trick pony. It is a kaleidoscope of colors. It's an enormous bag of everything that you can imagine under the sun. Communication is the most important aspect of a entrepreneur passing the test of getting to $1, $5, and $10 million in revenue.
Okay. All right. Listen, I'm asking you a question. I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but
it's good.
If you're gonna continue to let me play like the Dr. Phil, we'll be right back. If you're gonna let me continue to be Dr. Phil, I want to dig in a little bit further. So talk to me about some of the decision-making styles that you're proud of, right? As a leader and as a founder of a large company, right? Something that has done over $8 billion in business loans for the last 20 years. Give me some aspect of the way you communicate internally, not externally with like third parties outside the org, but how do you disseminate a message, but also receive a message and build some context around it? Give me an example.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I think years ago when we were smaller, the vision for the business was communicated in both large meetings with employees and one-on-one interactions. And I think that there was a lot of insecurity in having to sell this vision to each individual personally. You know, as founders, owners, leaders, they feel as insecure in those situations as the employee does, because they're worried that this employee in a small company with 10, 20, 30 employees may receive a sexier, more attractive offer from a competitor, may want to switch industries, may not like working at a company that doesn't have all of the benefits, the accoutrements, and the compensation that you would find at a larger company. And so the communication style that works at that level is a bit different than the one that works as you get larger. So at that smaller level, the leader has to be much more forceful in delivering the message, much more personal, and has to create really strong interpersonal relationships with each individual underneath them.
Okay.
And as you get larger, you begin to have a little bit of a safety net. You've got other people that you can use to disseminate the message. And you get to talk to fewer and fewer people.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so your messaging obviously changes because you are explaining your vision for dissemination, not for
word. Yeah. Let me help you with that. Let me help you with that. So I think what small business owners fail to do, right, in driving their business forward and achieving new heights and scaling, is that they fail to understand that there are systematic approaches to decision making, right? And before I get to that, I would say that, like, you were talking about visions, right? And it can't be a singular vision that's domiciled in the owner or founder's head. The vision needs to be inclusive, right? Without a clear, intentional vision, people tend to recreate their past, right? And past can include things like resentment and regret and anger, right? All of these things that kind of limit people from living in the presence and having consciousness. So let me rephrase that. I think without a clear and intentional vision that is inclusive of your employees, people, right, in the org tend to recreate their past, right? And so they struggle with things like resentment and regret and anger and all these negative emotions that point back to their past. And it limits them from being able to see see the future and what could be the positives that have yet to come, but also force them to ignore the consciousness of today. And I want to talk about decision-making skills because I think as owners and founders, too often is the case, like you were saying, they feel that the decision squarely falls upon their shoulders, right? But there are styles of decision-making that leaders, CEOs, and founders can rely upon that deliver honesty and create an emotional bank account with employees if they actually are honest in their communication with the decision-making style. So I want to draw a little bit of context around what I'm talking about to kind of better illustrate this point. But just imagine you have this long conference table and you've got two founders, one at opposite ends of the table, and then the table, right, is flanked with the leaders of the organization and the other employees. There's ways of making decisions that can be inclusive of the staff members' perspectives. And sometimes, and we're talking about why businesses fail, I think it's the failure on the leadership to be honest in their approach to decision-making styles that they use or they plan to use. And so I want to give you one example. So we talked about how some decision-making styles can be autocratic, meaning that the business owners or the founders are like, I'm going to make a decision. It's irrelevant what your opinions or perspectives are. I'm going to do this on my own. Or the two founders are like, we're going to do this on our own. And sometimes they stylize or are disingenuous about how they're going to make the decision, and they use or mask it with a consultative style. So they'll sit with an employee and they'll say like, well, I wanted to make a decision on X, but before I do that, I really wanted a little bit of your input. I think that is a deposit in the emotional bank account between the staff member and the founder, and it could be a positive one. If and truly the founder or owner plans to integrate some of that vision from that staff member into the decision at hand. But if they're not honest about the style in which they plan to make that decision and instead are going to rely upon this autocratic decision-making, then again, disingenuous. I think the staff member, the team member understands the disingenuousness or whatever of the leader. And again, it's a withdrawal on that emotional bank account. And too often it's the case. If you overdraw on that emotional bank account, that's when that staff member employee leaves. And I think that is too often is the case of many business owners. And I think if I was going to give some advice to these leaders today, I would say that, if you're honest about a consensus making, decision-making style, a consultative decision-making style, even a democratic one where you're taking votes, if you're honest in your approach about the style of decision-making, people will appreciate that. And that's a deposit in the emotional bank account. But again, if you're disingenuous and you're really masking, right, an authoritative decision-making style with this guise of, well, it's consultative. I really want your opinion. I really value what you have to say. I think people know that. And that's a limiting factor in the scaling of a business.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite decision-making style?
I would say consultative.
And so why is that?
Well, I think if you're honest about a decision and that it's consultative, you're involving leaders in the organizations, a select group of individuals or experts are weighing in with their opinion on a specific decision. The leader is going to gather those opinions, and then he's going to make a decision, he or she. So you're asking them for consultation. And I think that's, I think it was Ben Franklin who said that, if you have someone who you want to create a relationship of value around, you ask them to do you a favor. And so for great leaders that are looking to build that emotional bank account, they're building this consultative relationship with people where, again, you have to be honest about it, but you got to say, I really was hoping to get your perspective in this to help shape the vision.
And would you be honest and upfront and say that I'm going to get your perspective, but I may still make a very different decision in the end?
I think that's the only way to effectively communicate.
Perfect.
Yeah. And what's your favorite decision-making style?
My favorite is authoritarian.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like the one where I think I share this with 95% of the people that want to start their own business. And the reason you want to start your own business, I know, you're right? You know how to do something better than everybody else, including the people that you probably work for today, right? So if you work at a pizzeria and you're watching them make the pizza, serve the customers, decide how delivery is handled, you can do this better, right? You have better signage ideas. You have a great name. And the pepperoni you're going to use is going to be more amazing. And most importantly, that you're going to deal with the staff, right, in a more effective way than the people that you see around you. And so when you start that business, if this is the basis for starting it, you're going to apply an authoritarian style to decision making, and that will fail.
So this is tongue-in-cheek.
It's tongue-in-cheek.
Okay. All right. People are watching this going, oh, perfect. I identify with this authoritarian decision-making style.
It's a trick.
Okay. All right. That's the booby trap.
It is.
Right. That's the booby trap, right? That too many business owners, too many leaders, key employees inside of an organization, right? They take that authoritarian route, which is like, I'd rather be right than rich. Explain a little bit about what that means to you.
So every single day, small business owners sabotage themselves because they let the ego get involved in their decision-making inside the business because they have a fear of scarcity and a lot of insecurity. Hey, good news, everyone. Insecurity is required to become a successful business owner.
Yeah.
As is a lot of self-confidence, right? You kind of have to have a mix of both. It's such a weird set of traits that are required to run a business.
Right. I think it's called cognitive dissonance, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right. It's having this idea at odds with this other idea, right? And making a decision, right? Despite the fact that you have strong feelings that go in opposite directions, right? You're like, I want to be this empathetic, I want to empathize with my employees. And at the same time, I want to be this authoritarian leader because I know that it serves my ego, but also serves the organization.
Yeah. And as you get up there in revenue, right, as you get to the 7 and 8 figure mark, you're going to get good advice and you're going to start using a more consultative approach and then probably a more consensus driven approach where you're sitting around a table with people that are as smart and hopefully smarter than you are. And so you're going to get a consensus on any sort of strategic decision you're making for the business. But as the leader, it's still up to you ultimately what you decide.
Yeah.
And so how do you include, how do you listen to this consensus, but still stay inside the boundaries of the vision that you see for the business?
All right. So you're hitting on another point. So we're talking about in this episode about why businesses fail, right? How to create a high performing organization, right? And what we're saying is, right, the number one reason why business owners fail in their leadership and why businesses, why businesses then fail, right, is really based off of communication. And we're giving you examples of, all right, well, these are the ways that you can, stylistically can make decisions, consensus-based, democratic, authoritarian, consultative. We're giving you these examples. All of these examples can work, right? As long as there's honesty, right? Built around the context of the style. But I think another reason why businesses fail, we've talked about communication already, but we can transition to being conscious, right? Living in the now, right? We talked about the regrets and anger that force business owners live with fear from the past, right? But also are prohibitive of them living, are also prohibiting them from living in the now because of the future, which could be fear and, all these other emotions, right? When you don't live in the now, I think you run the risk of not making decisions. And so the second reason that I believe that businesses fail, first being communication, is the inability, right, to actualize on the decision making in real time. Talk to me a little bit about that. I know we don't have a tremendous amount of time, but one of my favorite phrases is, I can help you if you make a decision actively. If you
screw up actively.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you make a decision and it leads to you screwing up, but you did it, you did it with purpose, I can help you fix it. Now, the bad way to phrase it is, if you fuck up actively, I can help you unfuck it. Right? But if you fuck up passively, there's nothing really I can do. And it stems from many business owners or people in leadership positions being handcuffed, right, with fear of what the outcome may be, and then just fail to make a decision in real time. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this active versus passive decision making is extremely important to be able to get your business to sustainable levels of revenue. If you, in your personal life, in your professional life, are not a decision maker and not decisive, do not start a business. Stay away. And the reason is that as your business gets off the ground, you are going to be tempted to continue to do the same things over and over every single day. And that is one of the top reasons businesses fail, because business is about change and adaptation and doing something new and different every day. And the reason that happens is because your competitors are thinking about how to destroy you every minute of every day. So if you're not thinking about how to evolve, how to change, and how to get better, and how to constantly improve, you're going to be left behind.
Let me ask you a question, because, we're talking about why businesses fail. We said communication, the ability to make decisions in real time. Can you sprinkle in a little bit of the art of pivoting, and not necessarily the shiny object syndrome that so many business owners have of like chasing heat? But what I mean is, you talked about doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? The definition of insanity. But talk to me a little bit about doing the same thing over and over again, having that horsepower endurance to continue to adopt a plan. And
I love this pivot topic,
right? But knowing, right, that it's not working, and eventually being able to be mindful enough and conscious enough that you're like, hey, this isn't working. but it isn't because I'm not adopting a system and a process of committing to doing something over and over again. Instead, it's being conscious and mindful enough, curious enough, open enough to say it's not working.
Yeah. Every good system, every good process breaks. And if you are not expecting that when you run a business, you're in big trouble.
Right.
So you have to be prepared for when your processes and when your systems and when the way that you do things and what you're used to breaks. Not if, but when. And so let's talk a little bit about pivoting. You might think that that means that if your pizza shop is declining in revenue, that maybe you should turn it into an ice cream parlor. Right? I think that's a natural thought for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience in business.
Yeah.
Right? Let's start selling mugs and maybe do a car wash outside in the parking lot to generate extra revenue.
Right.
But you're dead in the water by the time we've gotten to this point, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Or you're already dead.
You're already
It's
dead.
a dead man
You're
walking
dead.
syndrome.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's define what a pivot is. A pivot is not an irrational decision to do something radical inside your business in a very short amount of time. A pivot is a testing process of new ideas that are incremental and marginal and well thought out. And it requires not only the idea of what you want to test in terms of changing your business, but it also requires you to get everyone around you bought into these changes. And so they have to help you make the changes slowly over time.
Yes.
And run a test.
And this goes back to making decisions with key members of your staff, that consultative style, right? Where an absence of a clear vision handcuffs everyone to this hurtful past of yesteryear. And I think freeing yourself from the shackles and the chains of the past means a highly functioning, a highly communicative, a large emotional bank account maintenance with employees where the vision is incorporated and inclusive of everyone. And therefore the best decisions aren't necessarily made at the top, right? But are made by the structure and foundation of all the employees where you can test, measure, rinse, repeat, and do it all over again. And then understanding the quantitative data points of those tests so that you can grow and scale the ones that win, right? It's always a horse race in the business.
Always.
And you got to see it's not, and people always say, well, I bet on the jockey, not the horse. I love these dumb little sayings, but I think the truth is
Met a lot of jockeys.
with the right leadership, a dumb idea can be amazing, right?
So many dumb ideas have scaled.
Absolutely. So many dumb ideas. And I think if you've got a great business, right? The way you prevent the business from failing in the future is building an inclusive vision. So I don't necessarily have anything else I want to end this with, but if your business is failing or you get the sense that it's limited, I want you to go back and rewatch this episode because I think we've given you 4 different reasons why businesses fail, right? As well as building a lot of context around it. Watch this. Share this episode with people that you know that are in business, even people that want to get into business, people looking to scale, build, even pivot, and see if they can identify with some of the context that we've given you. I also encourage you, right, to join our exclusive group that we've just put together of highly functioning business owners that are looking to grow and scale. So if you have a 6, 7, even 8-digit business that you're looking to scale even further, and you want to be part of a network of entrepreneurs that are like-minded, go to www.jointhefraternity.com. and see if this elite group of individuals, of business owners, of like-minded entrepreneurs is right for you. And we'd love to see you on the next Zoom.
That's a free 30-day trial.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys next time. Adios.